Hey everyone, it's Anthony Onesto, and this is New York HR. I am really excited, just coming off a fun interview with Drew Austin from Wade and Wendy, but we have a special guest today. In fact, actually, my mensch here, Steve Levy, is not with us today. So Steve, wherever you are, hello, how are you? But I think I can handle this show on my own. This is an HR conversation today. So I'm really excited to have Cindy Gordon, who is the VP of People at PolicyGenius. Hey, Cindy, how are you?
Hi. I'm fine. I'm great. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be talking to you.
Awesome, awesome. So Cindy, I coerced Cindy into coming and chatting with us. I'm just kidding. Cindy has an awesome background. She's leading HR at PolicyGenius, but really has a very interesting background in human resources. So Cindy, tell us a little bit, and for the folks that are tuning in for the first time, we'd like to segment our show in a couple of different ways. One is we talk about the person, we talk about Cindy and her background, because I always feel like if you don't know where someone's going or where they've been, you don't know where they're going. So we'd like to learn all about Cindy and her background. If she's from New York, where she's from, if she came to New York, why did she come to New York, and then learn a little bit about what she's doing as a head of HR, talk about how challenging and fun it is to be an HR person building companies in New York, and what's specific about New York than other places if you have that kind of experience. Then we talk about innovation, and then lastly, of course, pizza by the slice. It's New York. We got to do pizza by the slice location. So Cindy, tell us about you have an interesting background. You're not originally from New York, are you?
No, and I like to ask candidates this question when they're interviewing, and some stem all the way back to birth. So that's what I'm going to do here, and then you can cut me off if I ramble, which I've been known to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was born in Korea, and I was adopted at an early age. So 6 months old, I came to the States, and I grew up in Ohio in a Caucasian family.
Ohio.
Yeah, very similar areas. So I grew up in a very small town. I think the population was large enough to qualify as a city, but I was in the middle of cornfields and I had cows in my backyard, and we didn't live on a farm. But that's how close in proximity we were to farm life.
Are there any big towns in Ohio? I just imagine it's a culmination of small towns.
So a few fun facts. We do have 3 big cities: Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. And
Sure.
we have quite a few pro sports teams. We've got Northern Cleveland
some pretty good
sports, and some of them aren't doing so well. It's sad that I'm a Bengals fan, through and through. So we do have big cities, and it's also a state that has the largest number of colleges.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool. You go back there often?
No. I try to go maybe once a year, but a lot of my family and friends have relocated, and so less of a reason to go back. But there are things that I miss, like fresh air.
What's that? We don't know. We don't know.
So I grew up in a small town, and there's a middle child. I have an older sister who is also an adoptee from Korea. We're not biologically related.
Okay.
And then it was the 2 of us for a while. We're 2.5 years apart. And then 10 years later, my mother had a surprise. She got pregnant on a whim, and we had a little sister. And that was a little shocking for me, because I lived as the youngest child for a decade.
And now you're thrusted in the middle.
Yep. And I recall some of my behaviors had changed.
Little
I was in 4th grade, and
thing. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I stayed in Ohio and went to college at Miami University of Ohio.
Cool.
And then by the time I hit my junior or senior year, I felt an itch to go somewhere beyond the cornfields. And I had visited New York a few times for school trips when I was in high school and junior high, and then when I was in college. And I just felt the need to go to New York. Most of my friends migrated to Chicago. It was the closest urban setting for them.
Yeah.
But I just needed to get to New York.
Over that. You said forget Chicago.
Yep.
And what'd you study? So, there's some viewers that are sometimes new to HR or thinking about HR as in a career. What'd you study in college?
So I was a little lost. I started out studying psychology. Then I moved to business, whatever that means. And then that was within my first year. And then I moved back to psychology, and then I tacked on zoology as a second major.
Wait, hold on. We're in New York HR. Did you say zoology?
Yeah, it's the study of animals.
Yeah, it sounds right. It's not the study of zoos.
Not the study of zoos. Psychology is.
Wow, why zoo? I have to dive into that one, because that one, you can't get away with just throwing that one out there. And like, where did that come from?
I love animals.
Okay.
And I also, at one point, I thought, oh, I'll be a doctor. And so I'll combine my psychology studies with a science. And I didn't like chemistry. I didn't like biology, nor any of the other sciences. And so zoology was my process of elimination, where I landed. And then I realized I didn't want to be a doctor. So that was all within another semester. Then I tacked on a minor with nutrition. And I thought, oh, I'll be a dietitian.
Okay. So at this time, your parents are going nuts, going, what is she going to do? She's been a zoologist. She was like, a psychiatrist or a psychologist.
They lost me after my first semester, I think. Like, just go do. And then, but I realized after the fact, psychology was always the main guidepost for me. And dietetics and being a doctor, I wanted to do something to help people. I knew that much, and I wanted to
there's the tie.
Connect with people in a way. I just didn't know how that was going to form itself. And so I wound up graduating with a degree in psychology and a minor in nutrition. That's where I wound up.
So you came back to psychology, you added nutrition.
Yep.
Sounds good. So now you moved to New York. All your friends, Chicago. Forget Chicago. I'm going to New York. I'm going right to the coast. And what happened when you moved to New York?
I had no idea. I just knew I needed to get the hell out of Ohio. Okay. And my first apartment was in the middle of New Jersey. I didn't even know what I was doing, but I was like, I just need to get closer to New York. And then I didn't know how to get to New York. I was like, is there a bus? How do I get there? So
you were kind of, and by the way, I'm a huge fan of, movies of the 80s and 90s. So Coming to America, when they spun the globe and said, Queens, you were like New Jersey.
Yeah, that's east. Close. That's east of Ohio.
Fair enough.
Perfect. New Jersey's beside New York. And then I went running one day, and this was back in the time before, cell phones were just emerging. And so I'm dating myself here, but I didn't have a cell phone.
It's funny. I go, yep, I remember that.
So I went running one day, and then I saw a bus pass by that said Manhattan on it. It's like, there's my ticket. So I figured out the bus system, and then I started inching my way toward New York, and then I moved to Queens for 3 months. Then I moved to Manhattan, and I've been all over Manhattan. I can't tell you, I've moved countless times, but now I'm here.
That makes sense. And for those who don't know, if you're from Ohio and you're watching this show and you haven't been to New York, so Queens is in one of the boroughs. Manhattan obviously is what everyone thinks New York City is. But Queens is one of the boroughs inside of New York City. Manhattan is actually the place that you come most of the time. Cool. A little education. We like to educate on our show. So now you're in New York, and what's your first job in New York? What are you doing?
Ooh. So I originally thought I'd do something philanthropic. Again, my desire to help people. I wanted to do something in that realm, and the most direct correlation to helping people to me at the time was philanthropy. So I sent my resume out. I also liked fashion. So when I was in 4th grade, I would, again, no internet. And so I would call 1-800 numbers. I'd buy Vogue magazine. And then I'd call 1-800 numbers, disguise my voice as a more mature woman, and call for catalogs. So New York was also the fashion.
Oh, I think we lost you. I think we lost Cindy for 1 minute. Let's see if she comes back.
Philanthropic endeavors. Neither.
Yeah, I think we lost you for a little while there, but I think you're back.
Okay.
Cool.
So I sent my resume out to companies that focus on fashion and then philanthropic endeavors. And then I went on interviews, and I think my first job offer, even back in the day, was something like 15 grand offer. And they live on that. And so I realized, oh, I'll do volunteer work. So I went to Headhunter, and they placed me in a job at McKinsey.
Interesting. So McKinsey, and what did you do for McKinsey? What was the first job there?
At McKinsey, I went through the HR realm, and so and I was there for 15 years, and I did work in benefits.
Oh, I think did we lose you again?
Yeah.
Oh, there you are.
Okay. Okay, so I worked in benefits, then moved to recruiting, and then to professional development and coaching, all like separate entities.
So you were sending resumes out for fashion and philanthropy, and found yourself with. And by the way, I love New York. Anytime you're on an interview in New York, there's a fire truck in the background. So
yes,
that's how you know you're in New York. But now, and McKinsey, not sure, like. Just give me a brief, like where did that, like how I guess the recruiter said, hey, go talk to these folks. They're doing some interesting things in consulting. Mm-hmm. You'll have a 15-year career there.
Yeah, so when I went on my interviews, I did notice a difference in how structured the interview process was and their focus on my development and what I was interested in. And they did talk a lot about their values. And that struck a chord with me relative to the other interviews I had been on at scrappy companies that wanted to pay me $15,000. So
this was in 2000, right?
Yeah. So
how big was McKinsey in 2000? I mean, they probably had a small presence at that point.
No, I mean, they had been around for a while. And so it was a global company, still in the top 3 big management consulting firms. Mm-hmm. I think maybe at the time that I joined, there were 70 global offices, and
okay, so they were big. Yeah, it was
tens of thousands of people. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
So, I mean, I'm not going to lie. After my benchmarking, interviewing elsewhere, money did play a factor. So, on top of the connection I felt with people and development.
Nope, we may have lost you again. Oh, there you are.
Oh, man. Okay.
It's all right. It's good. It's technology. Okay. It's technology. Yeah. I'm on a dial-up, evidently.
Okay. So I wanted to make sure I was surviving in the city, too. So on top of the people, a comp package made
helpful, sure.
Yeah.
And so from McKinsey, you decide to go into a startup, right?
Yes. So, I mean, I was at McKinsey for 15 years. I don't think I thought it would be a short stint for me, but then they kept creating opportunities for me based on my interest areas. So there was opportunity to grow, and it made sense because it was such a large company. But I found myself trending toward wanting to have more connections with people and seeing what happens after I build those connections, not just short interactions and then what happens. And so my last 5 years at McKinsey, when I was doing professional development and coaching, that's when I truly felt a calling. I loved helping people navigate their own way. And I do feel like based on my upbringing, I felt like a black sheep a lot of the time in Ohio. I stuck out. It was very homogenous culture there. I felt welcomed, but I didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. Sure. Also, being a middle child after a while of not being a middle child played a role in identity. And I just didn't know what my way was. And my parents were pretty hands-off, which in some ways is a nice thing to have. But I think I was always looking for direction. And I couldn't find my direction. And so then I decided to move to a huge city where you become even more anonymous unless you put yourself out there. But that helped to instill some confidence in me to seek out my own path versus waiting for others to give it to me. And so through coaching of others, though, at McKinsey, especially, we're talking Ivy League business consultants who have had, you know, been very, very successful. They've had track records of success, and then they're thrown into a pool of people who look and act and have the smarts that they have. And then what do you do? And it was interesting for me to help them still figure out their own paths amidst people who they might have felt looked like them and also created more competition. So then,
so yeah. I mean, I imagine competition and that sort of like, how did you, you know, what were the things that you used, what techniques or anything that you used to sort of guide these folks who theoretically super smart, probably if you're going to an Ivy League school, super connected from a family perspective, other, you know, and so what, you know, what are you giving to these folks that maybe they didn't have before?
What I liked about my role, and also what I continue to enjoy about my role today, is being the unbiased non-stakeholder. I mean, it's so much easier too to help to guide others than yourself. And I think they say that most people who study psychology are really trying to help themselves.
Right.
And so I've learned a lot by having a window, looking through a window on others. It's taught me a lot, but in turn, I can help others based on my own experiences of uncertainty and dealing with ambiguity. And what's unique with an internal function is you get a holistic view of everything that's going on. So you can squash any misconceptions because ego gets in the way. And if you're already feeling self-conscious and you're lacking confidence, then you're looking at the world through that narrative, and everything's going to validate that narrative, and then it's truth. All of a sudden, it's truth.
Yeah, because
so playing a role to like invalidate the narratives that exist in people's heads, especially driven people who have led structured lives, was eye-opening, and it felt like a win every time people were. Folks were able to connect the dots and say, oh, now I see this differently. And we each have our own paths.
And what was like, if you would identify the #1 challenge that these folks have? So again, you high performing, well-educated, like what, if you were to boil it down to like, this was the one thing I found that was common through all these folks that I was able to help them with, what would that be?
It was worrying so much about how they came off to external sources that they lost sight of what was important to them.
Interesting. So they were more worried with external, say that one more time, because I'm a New Yorker, I'm a middle-class kid from New York, so I repeat things twice.
Yeah, I think the ego comes into play. And so you've led this pedigreed life where you have been successful and it's gotten you to a certain point of success, right? You're at a top-tier management consulting firm, but then you worry so much about how you're coming off and performing based on others' opinions that you forget why that's important to you, other than that it's important to get to the next level. So people forgot what their own needs were.
Got it.
And bringing them back down and centering on an intrinsic focus to then drive their purpose was a big thing, and that was a theme. You're putting a whole bunch of people who are in the same role, in the same environment in New York. I also noticed the difference across office locations with clients, right? You mimic the clients. So it just added so much pressure to situations that people weren't focusing on themselves. They were focusing on themselves in an extrinsically motivated way.
Got it. So what do you think? Couple of things. One, two questions. Do you think the structure at McKinsey had something to blame there? I've known many of the consulting firms and some of the structures, and I know when I was with Publicis, Razorfish or Publicis, I mean, we had 13, 14 levels of our organization, which is insane when you think of a startup, right? But your goal was to always level up, right? So you were always thinking about, and that was, and now we're starting to see more of a trend of like, what can I learn versus how can I move up? And it sounds like you're around maybe a little younger than I am, but we grew up with movies where every movie was Michael J. Fox moving up to a corner office somewhere, like he was in the mailroom and now he's over here. It's like that was all we knew. But anyway, back to the question. One, was McKinsey at fault a little bit in the design? And then two, the difference when you just mentioned New York versus other offices. I'd love you to double click on that a little bit.
Yeah, so your first question, I don't think McKinsey was at fault. I honestly, I leveraged the infrastructure and the way that they valued the people aspect of the business. I leverage all of those learnings today in my role. It's a great foundation for people development and an overall talent model. I think where it can fall short is when you've got people, and you can't remove the human aspect from it. You can put a whole bunch of structure in place. You can talk about it. You can have tons of modules and materials, but that's process and structure. So you still need human beings until we can find ways to have robots do our jobs. You still need the human aspect. And I think there's no way to remove that from someone's experience at the company. And so I think where it would fall short at times is not enough focus on purpose and development. It was more about deliverables and deadlines and meeting the needs of the client, and sometimes it could get lost. And then I think that's kind of there's an overlay of the pressure, environmental pressures that exist, where the need is to have everything accessible immediately 24/7 to serve needs, and technology helps to allow that to happen, right? And it can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing.
Sure.
And so the segue into geography, oftentimes New York can pave the way for other areas. It's ahead of the game because as a forcing mechanism, you have, it's an international city. You have people from all walks of life and experience and cultures coming together. And it's a bustling place. And I think you combine that with whatever the norm that has been set. There's a social norm here where it's the city that never sleeps. So then you add in career focus, and it can feel like the city that never sleeps and the city that you work in, where you work never sleeps. And there's added pressure to it that you don't see elsewhere. And because there's a subscription element to it, so it's supply and demand. So if a lot of people want to be in a sexy city, and then you've got a lot of sexy opportunities here in the city, then it breeds competitiveness, because then you have to one-up somebody else in order to land a position somewhere. And so that looks different than if I was in Columbus, Ohio still. Opportunities abound more so in New York than Columbus, but you've got a lot more people here who are vying for the same opportunities. And so I noticed that when I was at McKinsey, because I had peers across the board in other offices. And most of the time in the New York office, we were paving the way for new policies. It's like, oh, we've never experienced this before as a company. Now we have to design something around it.
Right.
So it felt like on top of keeping up with volume, we were also it was a forcing mechanism to design policies and processes too that hadn't been built before.
Yeah. Wow. Very cool. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I'm always the perspective of outside of New York and cultural differences, but also just like you said, the dynamic of the city itself. always being on, you know, whether it's socially or professionally, it's definitely a different dynamic. And even the people, you know, when we think of HR and recruiting folks within the New York system, and I imagine McKinsey pulled from all over the world, New York being an attractive place for them to come and live. But even just the experience in New York is pretty powerful. And I don't think you see that a lot in other areas.
Yeah, I agree.
I think I'm frozen here, except for my voice, which is okay. Benefit for everyone on the video. So now you're now at, well, you were at Oscar right after McKinsey. Why the leap from a large company to a startup?
Yeah, so 15 years at McKinsey. I had, after that length of time, I was searching for, are you still there?
I am.
Okay, great. Now, okay, there you are. I was searching for what was next for myself, and again, McKinsey was great at giving me new opportunities, but I felt like I had hit my threshold for what I could do there. And so what's great about McKinsey also is the alumni network that they have, just
Sure.
tons and tons of connections, and they're more than willing to go above and beyond for people who have worked at McKinsey before. And so there was, at one point in time, I had 120 consultants that I was the professional development manager for. And one of the consultants was a very high performer. He was he was a doctor, and then he decided to leave to pursue his law degree because why not? But he's doing his law degree part-time at NYU, and then he was asked to serve as an advisor at a healthcare tech startup because he's a doctor. And so he left. And it was exciting. A lot of consultants decided to move to go do their own entrepreneurial things. And you see a lot of former management consultants at startups.
Sure, yeah. Well, a lot of them founders, CEOs.
Yep. Including PolicyGenius. So he left, and then 8 months after he left, he had reached out and he said, hey, we've got this role open here. Would you be interested? And it was the right time, and I said I'd be interested in hearing more, and it was a head of people role at Oscar. And so within milliseconds of my agreeing to hear more, I got an invite for a long set of interviews. So I guess I had signed up to interview.
You're in, yeah.
Yeah, and then I met
and for those people, those people that don't know what Oscar, can you describe what it was?
Sure.
Or what it is?
Yeah, Oscar Insurance is a healthcare tech startup, and it's an insurance carrier. And I think it has a presence now in 3 different states: California, Texas, and New York.
Cool.
And it's individual insurance. So if you think of the exchange, the healthcare exchange for people who are freelancers or 1099 workers, if we've got HR people listening, it's for individuals who don't have access to group insurance coverage.
Got it. Cool.
So I met with 14% of the company at the time, and each person, I don't think they finalized my interview schedule until the day of, and then there were some switches. And then I met with 14% of the company. They asked me all the same questions, and I was like, oh, they could use a little bit of structure.
Right.
And I know they had been searching for a while, so I was the 80th hire there.
Cool.
And then,
how big are they now? Do you know?
I think they're 400 plus at this point in time. It does fluctuate because there are short-term employees that need to be staffed on the sales side for open enrollment on the exchange.
Yep, makes sense. Yep.
So at one point, though, so I was the 80th hire, and then in a year and a half's time, we had scaled to 545. So it was a great learning experience for me in a first-time operational.
Sure. You're in operational HR. You're you were in there within McKinsey, but here you're now head. You're leading recruiting, HR, what did your 80th employee, what chaos that must have been growing that quickly. I like to call it changing the wheels on the bus as it's moving.
Yeah.
Couple of insights there, and then we'll move to I'd love to talk a little bit about what you're doing at PolicyGenius, but insights of taking a company from 80 to 500 in such a short period of time?
Yeah, you know, I use this analogy a lot, and I didn't coin the phrase, but it's building muscle and bone at the same time. I think startups are very much that. You're trying to build a foundation that for scale, and but you have to keep things moving, and you have to operate. And so what was interesting was I was on my first day of work, I was handed an Excel file with, I don't know, 5 pages of line items, and like they had basically pulled leadership and various stakeholders at the company and what they wanted to see happen now that I was joining. It was like, oh, magically we have a head of people and everything's going to
here's
happen.
your map. Here's your map. Yeah.
So
at least they had the insight to ask.
Yeah, I appreciated that it was prepped, but then it was, you know, instilling in them the idea that we have to like understand what our philosophy is on people and approach, and understand what already has existed and what just manifested itself organically. And then from there, we could move forward with some of the more tactical components, but it was more like defining the strategy first and to teach them to be a little patient to get there. But and the mindset shift for me was impact at a global organization like McKinsey looks very different than impact at a small company. The smallest thing, I could have blinked at somebody and they were like, oh my gosh, that was so impactful. You're adding so much value. And so for me, it was a cultural shift to
big difference, right? Like when you're in startup world, I mean, every little piece that you turn has a huge impact. Where a global organization, it does, but it takes more time to make that impact.
It has to be bigger. It has to have a wow factor to it. And,
sure.
I could have done the smallest thing, and they're like, this is really helping things. And so it was a great environment to try things, and I appreciate that they took a bet on me in a first-time head of people role.
That's a good bet. I don't think it was you know, they were McKinsey background kind of helped mitigate the risk there, by the way. So it was a sure bet. I would say genius, but you know, I think the background helped and the smarts. So now you're at PolicyGenius. Tell us what is PolicyGenius and what do they do, and what are you doing over there now?
Yeah, so PolicyGenius is an online insurance marketplace, and we specialize in individual insurance across currently 5 product lines: life insurance, disability insurance, pet insurance, renters insurance, and health. And health was the most recent one that we launched around a year ago. Basically what we're doing is we're an independent broker of sorts. So we have an inside sales team here, and they're all licensed agents across all 50 states. Our biggest generator of revenue to date is our life insurance. I think the co-founders, when they first started shipping product, they thought it would be pet insurance. They're pet owners. It's an area of passion for them, and it's an untapped market largely. But then quickly they learned that there is a need for financial protection, and life insurance was going to be a big hit for them.
And how are they going against sort of the traditional, because it seems like, especially with Oscar, right? These are traditional industries, you know, I would argue are ripe for disruption, but are very difficult, not easy to enter into these marketplaces. A lot of compliance, regulatory issues. Why, you know, what was there, I mean, other than the pet insurance, but did they know how complex this industry was, and why, and how are they going up against like the MetLives and the other sort of traditional players?
So a little bit of background on our co-founders here. Jennifer and Francois both came from McKinsey. That's how I know them. I was Francois' professional development manager.
Powerful network.
And then I staffed him on his first project, and it was with Jen, our CEO. So technically, I should get credit for all of the successes of PolicyGenius.
Exactly.
Just kidding.
Exactly. No.
They had the idea, sure. But what sets us apart is we're not a carrier. So dealing with regulatory and compliance is less of a concern for us because we're a broker. And we can actually help the carriers so when I talk about an online insurance marketplace, we have this online checkup tool. So if you're looking for life insurance, for example, you could go online, you're typing in relevant information, and you're walked through screens. And there's an educational component along the way. We'll ask you some questions, but you're also learning about why you're being asked these questions. And then out at the end is a set of personalized quotes that helps you stack, it's a comparison, that helps you stack up the options available to you and gives you a rundown of the policies and the pricing.
Oh, interesting.
Then in aggregate, you get to size up everything.
Priceline.com for insurance of some sort.
Sure. That's one component.
The Uber of insurance. Oh, no, we're not allowed to say Uber of anymore. Sorry.
That's one aspect. And what's great is we're unbiased because we're an independent marketplace. And so we are trying to help people find the best coverage that they can for themselves and make them feel good about it along the way.
And how do you guys make money? Every deal you sign, there's a percentage comes your way from
the commissions.
Insurance.
Yep. So since we're brokers, we're a brokerage, we get commissions from the carriers.
Got it.
And
how many people do you guys have right now?
We'll be 101 on Monday.
Cool. Congratulations. The 100 mark.
Yes.
Pivotal time. Cool.
Very exciting.
All in New York, or I would imagine you're all over?
We're currently only based in New York, but all of our agents are licensed in all 50 states.
Great. And so so brokerage, insurance brokerage has been around forever. Like you watch the old movies and you imagine some dude in black and white, with the briefcase going door, not next to the vacuum sales guy. You're in a very traditional marketplace. How are you finding folks? Like, what's your brand pitch? What's your employer pitch to get folks to work for PolicyGenius?
I think it's very exciting for people, especially people who come from traditional insurance agency backgrounds, because we're trying to turn the way people can get the coverage they need on its head by leveraging technology and trying to make more efficient and educational the process and getting there, and even selecting what is right. Most of the time, what we've heard through accounts and what we know is that if I need a policy, say a life insurance, I just had this conversation this morning. Okay, I just had a baby. I need a life insurance policy now. Let me just go through my friend and see if they have any recommendations. Okay, boom, done. But with that, you don't really know what all of your options are and if you're finding the best coverage for your needs. And so we've got a content platform too, where we're just trying to educate the consumers broadly when it comes to financial protection, and hoping that will generate leads. I just went off on a tangent though.
It's good, it helps.
Okay, but your original question was?
People coming to you guys.
Yes.
Very traditional industry. How are you attracting folks?
Yes, so when it comes to the employer attraction side, a lot of our employees have been in traditional settings where you put your head down, you work in a very small agency, like a franchise. Say, I'm not going to name any names, but we all know, like,
we know them. Yep.
Brokers out there. And it can feel archaic. There are papers. There's a lot of paperwork that you're pushing around. Underwriting can take forever, if I'm using life insurance as an example. And the people who are applying for it don't know what's happening and when it's going to close. And so we've got a set of operational team members that can help our clients through every step of the way, from the moment people are interested in applying for a policy all the way through to getting approved for application, and even the trickier cases. So I think that's exciting for potential employees because they know that they're helping to build something that's very different than what they're used to. And it's very mission driven. Most of the people, I would say all of the people we've hired want to help people. They want to change the face of the industry to make people's lives better. And to be able to join together on this mission of trying to change it, through leveraging technology and making things more efficient, I think has been fantastic. And that happened at Oscar too.
Yeah, I'm sure.
There was a new type of insurance that leveraged technology.
You're disrupting a marketplace. And I think, it's funny because years ago it was about disrupting. Now I think it's more about mission driven, like helping people through technology, through your services. At the end of the day, we're all making money. And at the end of the day, there's profit and losses. But there's a lot of focus on this, social good movement, which I think is really powerful, because I think if you can figure out how to make money and do well for the community, the environment, all that stuff, that's sort of the holy grail in the future. So I personally feel there is a lack of, and I've written about this many times on my blog and other places, this lack of innovation that exists in HR. In some cases, it's very pervasive. You have some traditional folks. Are you guys doing anything there that you would label as more innovative or cutting edge, or just sort of thinking out of the box? Because I imagine even though it's a traditional vertical or industry, you probably have to do things a little bit differently in terms of HR and the way you approach that. Are there anything that you're doing there that you would label a new idea or innovative that you can share with us?
Yeah, and feel free to challenge me on this.
Oh, I will.
Okay,
No,
I think about it a little bit differently, and alluding to this a while ago in one of my long rambles with you. As much as when I think about innovation, it's what can we be doing what is broken, and then what can we be doing about it? And sometimes it's bringing us back to basics. And so one thing that I think PolicyGenius co-founders have been innovative on an approach is bringing on a head of people as the 23rd hire for a company. It's very rare.
It's very rare, yep.
And they thought about it in a proactive way. I remember challenging them on it when they were talking to me about the opportunity, and I said, "Are you sure you need me? You're only like."
It's a great interview, by the
way. You could probably go for a little bit longer and just bring in some people who can execute. And they're like, "What do you mean? We're already 20 plus people, and our plates are getting full. Who's going to focus on talent?" And he's like, wow, okay, value proposition in and of itself, that aligns with my philosophy, that speaks volumes. And one innovative thing that companies can think about is, and more that we could be doing as an HR force and within the tech industry, is educating companies and new companies about the importance of people as an internal function. Yes, is it directly tied to revenue? In some ways, you could find a way for it to be directly tied to revenue. It's just such an important facet, and we've seen too many things implode as a result of not investing in thinking about the people function strategically and soon enough. It becomes more reactive. And so is it innovative? I think it is forward thinking because it's proactive. And so that's like one thing from a larger scale perspective. Personally, what I've learned, when I was at McKinsey, I had peers across all offices. Internationally, and I leveraged those peers a lot. It helped me in my development. And when you're at a startup, especially a small one, you only have so many people to leverage, and you're usually the one hired to be the one person in your role, and you're also wearing multiple hats. So it's just like you're running around doing multiple things. So how are you truly developing if you're being hired in as the expert? And so one thing that I like to leverage that is zero cost is building an external peer network of people who are 6, 12, 18 months ahead of you, who and 6, 12, 18 months behind you, because that's helping you flex your coaching muscles to those who are behind you in development or trajectory or experience, but you're also leveraging the people who are ahead and learning about pitfalls or what they would have done differently, or at least generating ideas. And that's where true development can happen beyond the workplace, beyond what a company can give, especially if it's trying to manage economics and investments. And so leveraging the peer coaching as a development tool is big. And so I do that for people who are joining the company, especially people who come from backgrounds where they are not connected to anybody. It might be their first time at a tech startup. Let me connect you to people, and leveraging my peer network to find those connections as well. And I've learned a lot from mine.
You're basically connecting. So there are folks within your organization that are being challenged or have a challenge, and you're connecting them into a network of folks that you're. So originally, when I heard it, I thought it was you connecting, which it sounds like you do anyway. But you're actually using this as a tool, or your experience in doing that at McKinsey for the startup, giving those people the opportunity, connecting them with potential mentors or coaches or things like that through your own networks.
Yep, across the board. Yep.
Powerful, yeah.
I mean, like if I look at PolicyGenius, there's peer coaching that I've set up for Jen, our CEO, all the way through to an entry-level employee whose first job out of college is with us. There's so much that can be learned by leveraging network and benchmarking. We're a big benchmarking company. And I would say that at most companies, the way to speak the language of a founder or CEO is, this is like my research, here's some data, and this is what's going on. And it's not, we're not stealing ideas, it's to iterate and ideate on what's out there, and it helps us keep the pulse too. So that it's multifaceted in the amount of value that it can bring to the table.
I love that. I think that's a great idea. I think most HR folks think about leveraging internal networks for coaching and mentoring. And what you're saying is, especially with startups where there's not a ton of folks that are doing similar things, or go external, build networks, do it that way. And in some cases there are industry competitors. In other cases, it's just sort of the tech startup down the block that you can connect to your engineers. Or I think it's it's very innovative idea. And thinking about HR early on has been, something that I've been preaching for years. When dot-com boom years ago, and I was head of HR for a bunch of different startups, and I think we were ahead of the curve there, and we kind of fell off a little bit when the bust happened. But I'm starting to see more movement, thinking of HR less as, who's the office manager that can do the benefits program, and more so as let's bring in a strategic person very early on. They're still behind the curve a little bit. They still wait too long, but I definitely see some movement there. So I think that's also innovative. That's great stuff. So we're up on 50 minutes, and so I mean I'm looking at something. I can't stop looking at it. Typically I go right to the pizza question, but I have to go. So competitive power lifter.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So.
You didn't think that one was going to come up.
Very long time ago.
You put that last, thinking there's no way he's getting to 7.
Yeah.
Built 8.
So I think this was part of my identity crisis when I was in Ohio. And I tried to get involved in a lot of sports, one of them being cheerleading.
Okay.
It was an underrepresented It wasn't considered a sport at my school. And so in order to make it a sport, when I was a captain, we made people more athletic. And so we did running drills and we started weightlifting. And I started weightlifting when I was in 7th grade, and at our high school weightlifting room that was open to the community. And so I got addicted to it. I would go every day, even in the summertime. And I look back now, I'm like, how did I do that? But in the summertime, and our summers off, I would wake up at 7 a.m. I had a friend, Patty, shout out Patty. And we'd wake up at 7 a.m., go running, and then go weightlift in the summer. I don't know. So it got to the point where, because it was a community gym, there were other people who started to notice that we were weightlifting every day. And so they encouraged us to start competing and county co-ed competitions.
Cool.
And so Patty and I did that. And at the time, I think I was 70 pounds. So it was to my advantage when you could divide by my body weight the amount I was lifting. But sometimes the lowest weight class was 103, and then I was screwed.
That's awesome. And by the way, you're a pioneer. Like, if you think about cheerleading now, the amount of CrossFit and the lifting and the training that goes involved in it, you guys were pioneering that stuff. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're a pioneer. And I'm sorry, the running mate, who was your friend that used to wake up at 7?
Patty.
Patty. All right, Patty. Shout out Patty. All right, so we're going to finish. I don't want to finish there. Let's finish with New York is a great place for food everywhere, but I feel like it's one of the best places to get a slice of pizza very quickly. And, when you're head of HR of a company like PolicyGenius, you're probably not taking many lunches. So you're probably eating at your desk because there's a lot of stuff to do. Where are you guys located? And then what's your favorite Pizza by the Slice location here in New York?
Okay, so PolicyGenius is located in the Flatiron area.
Okay.
Close to Union Square, on the cusp of Chelsea, Union Square, Flatiron.
Home of the internet here in New York?
Yeah, Silicon Alley.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so that's where we're located.
And what do you guys, just before you get into pizza, what roles are you looking for? Let's, if there are folks out there know good people, it's always good to get those out there.
We are dying to find a head of product.
Got it.
And as everyone else is, senior engineers. And we're looking for a lot of people on our operations team, inside sales associates, case management associates, and customer success and delivery associates.
Cool. So head of product, which sounds like a great place to be. Senior engineers and operational sales and so forth. Cool. So now Pizza by the Slice, where are you? So you're in Flatiron. Where are you jumping out to get, 2 slices and a Diet Coke for $5?
So I'm a foodie, and I will travel as far as possible to get good food. And I'm going to go mainstream here, though. And what remains my favorite slice is Joe's on Carmine.
All right. Cool.
Is that a popular opinion?
We have a lot of raves. We have the two brothers, 2 slices for $5, and a Diet Coke is pretty popular, but I can't go wrong. You can't go wrong with John's.
I'm a big dough-like person, so the ratio of sauce to the type of bread consistency to cheese has to be evenly laid out.
Fair enough. I agree. Not too much cheese, not too much sauce. Right. I like it. I like it a lot. I like the science behind the decision. It's very nice.
Thank you.
So, well, Cindy, thank you so much for taking time today. Thank you for chatting with us. Cindy Gordon, again, VP of People at PolicyGenius. Anything else? Any parting words for our viewers, Cindy, before we go?
When you're, I would say, know your purpose. Know your purpose and don't get lost with the external forces. That's when you'll truly be happy and fulfilled.
I love it. This is New York HR. Know your purpose. Cindy, thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
Okay. All right. Bye. Thanks.